Hi there, Andy Barrow here, one of the AIP Athlete Appearance Liaisons, and this is the third video in our timelining series. If you haven't seen the other two yet, you can check them out on our AIP YouTube channel. Just to get you up to speed, the first one would have been an exercise to show you how to create your own timeline and really begin kind of plotting your story so you can plan appearances. The second video would have gone a bit deeper on that and shown you how to pick out the relative stories for any particular theme in an appearance you were going to undertake. And this video will go one stage further and show you how to expand on those main stories that you're planning to use in your appearance. And what we're going to do, I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to go back to the example we were using in the previous video, which is a theme of resilience. So just sharing my screen now. As I showed you in the previous video, I had my timeline and the 5 most relevant stories for that resilience theme. Now, what I had there was a tough time around having a spinal cord injury. I had missing out on the Sydney Paralympic Games. I had injury during the middle of my career. I had losing the bronze medal match at Beijing, and I had retiring and going from being a full-time athlete to starting a new business and an absolute novice in that field. So those were my 5 stories I was going to use. Now, what we're going to use is something we call the 5 and 3 technique, which is then picking out 3 main points for each of those 5 stories. So I'll show you a diagram of what that would look like right now. So here we go. I mentioned all 5 of my stories just now, and I was thinking, well, what were the 3 takeaways that we're going to get from each of those stories? What were the main things we were going to get? And the reason we're kind of putting them in these kind of very kind of soundbite-ish takeaways is that people are only going to remember a certain amount of things from your appearance. So this is a way to make those stories quite punchy. So the first story, the low point from having your spinal cord injury, the idea you're not going to walk out of this hospital, you're going to be using a wheelchair from now on. What were my 3 main points from that? They were that, well, I can't change the past. This is a low point, so things can only get better from here. And I've got to take it one day at a time. So those are my 3 main headlines for that one. Moving on to the next story, missing out on Sydney. I realise now you weren't good enough at the time, but you do know what you need to do to be good enough, and change is in your hands. So if you want it enough, you're going to change it. Then my third story, that prolonged injury period. Nothing's permanent. It will not last forever. Use this time to build yourself up even stronger than you were before. What fringe benefits, what positives can you get out of this negative? And the third point was, don't let this happen again. Remember this feeling, you don't want to experience it again, so you better make changes. Then the losing the bronze game in Beijing, that was one headline, that was the worst moment of my sporting career. The next one was, again, pretty much like the injury theme. You never want to feel like this again, so make sure that's your motivation to make changes. And the third point was understanding that, okay, sport means a huge amount to me, but it's not everything in my life. Get back in perspective for a moment. There are bigger things out there than just a game. And then the 5th story that I had, retiring from wheelchair rugby. 3 points from that. It's very daunting. It's lonely, going from being in a team environment all the time to just being an individual. And you've been in scenarios like this before, so use what you've learned to be able to thrive and embrace this new challenge. So those were my 5 and 3 from those main resilience point stories. So you can see there, you've almost got 15 talking points already. So we've gone from having a very broad timeline to actually narrowing that down to one particular theme, to picking out the 5 stories we were going to use to actually putting some meat on the bones of those 5 stories. Now, remember that all this is going to take some time, so you might not always use 5 stories, 3 points, 15 short talking points. In fact, you could probably expand one of these little stories out to make an interesting anecdote at any time. But what this is a really good template, a really good kind of structure to follow in order to be able to tell your stories better and with a bit more, just some more kind of bones, really, rather than just really blank descriptions. It's a way of you being able to just get them right in your head so you understand how you're going to be able to tell them to an audience. Okay, so I'm going to flash those up on the screen again for the last minute or so, just so you have them. But why not try taking this away? Once you've done your timeline, why not try going back, identifying 5 stories on a particular theme? Remember what I said in the video before, it doesn't have to be resilience. It can be anything. You could base it around a visit to a primary school, for example, or you could base it around winning, or you could base it around hard work. But try then picking out those 5 stories and the 3 major points, and then you'll have your 5 points and your 3 hooks. So I hope that all makes sense. I'm Andy Barrow. Check back to our AIP YouTube channel for more useful training content just like this.